They say blood is thicker than water, but in my house, greed is thicker than both. My name is Lisa. I'm 60 years old. I've worked 40 years in the school district, and I thought my retirement would be spent sipping tea and watching the birds. Instead, I spent it watching my son and his wife plan my accidental disappearance into a state-run nursing home. They thought I was a senile old woman with nothing but a Social Security check. They were wrong. Very, very wrong. Stick around, because the look on my daughter-in-law's face when the sheriff arrived is something you'll want to see twice. It all started 6 months ago. My son Mark, my only boy, showed up on my porch with his wife, Sarah. Sarah is the kind of woman who smiles with her teeth, but never her eyes. She told me, "Lisa, we're so worried about you living here all alone in this big house. It's too much for you to clean. Why don't we move in? We can help with the bills, and I can take over the cooking." I should have known then. When someone offers to take your burden, they're usually looking for your treasure. I loved my son, so I said yes. Within 2 weeks, my craft room was turned into Sarah's influencer studio. My late husband's recliner was in the garage, and I was relegated to the small guest room in the back, right next to the noisy laundry room. It started small. Sarah would forget to set a plate for me at dinner. "Oh, Lisa, I thought you'd already eaten your toast," she chirped, while she and Mark feasted on steak I had paid for. Then she started organizing my belongings. My wedding photos ended up in shoeboxes in the attic. My grandmother's china? Too cluttered, Sarah said, as she replaced it with cheap, trendy plastic plates. I watched Mark. I waited for him to say, "Hey, that's my mother's house," but he just looked at his phone. He was tired, he said. Sarah was just trying to modernize things, he said. That's when I realized my son wasn't my protector anymore. He was Sarah's accomplice. One Tuesday, I came home from the grocery store, buying the organic kale Sarah insisted on, with my own money, mind you, and I found my suitcases sitting in the hallway. Sarah was standing there holding a clipboard. "Lisa, we had a professional look at the stairs. They're just too dangerous for someone your age. We found this lovely place called Gray Oaks. It's only 40 minutes away. You'll have friends your own age, and we can visit you. Well, once a month at least." I looked at the brochure. It looked like a hospital for people the world wanted to forget. I looked at Mark. He wouldn't even look at me. He just stared at the floor like a coward. Sarah leaned in, her voice dropping that fake sweet tone. "It's for the best, Lisa. Besides, we need the extra space. We're thinking of turning your room into a walk-in closet for my handbags." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My mother always told me, never let them see you sweat until you're ready to bring the fire. I just smiled. A slow, calm smile that made Sarah's eyes twitch. "You're right, Sarah," I said. "Safety is so important. Let me think about it overnight. I have some paperwork to finish up first." She thought she had won. She went into the kitchen and opened a bottle of my expensive wine to celebrate. But as I sat in my small, crammed room that night, I wasn't looking at nursing home brochures. I was looking at a set of legal documents Sarah didn't know existed. You see, Mark thinks he inherited this house when his father died. But my husband was a smart man. He knew his son was easily swayed. He left the house, the land, and the 3 rental properties on this street entirely to me. The next morning, I didn't pack a suitcase. I made a phone call to a man named Mr. Henderson. He's been my lawyer for 30 years. I told him, "It's time, Bill. Bring the original deed and the eviction notices. We're clearing out the trash." I walked into the kitchen where Sarah was eating breakfast, acting like she already owned the place. I leaned over and whispered, "I hope you enjoyed the guest room, Sarah, because by this time tomorrow, you're going to be very familiar with the inside of a moving truck." Her face went pale. "What are you talking about, you crazy old woman?" she snapped. "Oh," I said, pulling out my phone to show her the bank balance she never knew I had. "I'm not crazy. I'm just the landlord, and your rent is 5 months overdue."
Have you ever had someone look you straight in the eye and tell you the sky is green? That's what part 2 of my story is about. After I told Sarah that her rent was overdue, she didn't pack her bags. No, she did something much more dangerous. She tried to make me believe I was losing my mind. They call it gaslighting, but where I come from, we call it digging your own grave. Stay tuned, because today I'm going to show you exactly how I caught them red-handed on a hidden camera they never knew I installed. The morning after my confrontation with Sarah, the house felt different. It was quiet. Too quiet. Usually, I'd hear Sarah's loud voice filming her day-in-the-life videos for her 500 followers, or the sound of my son Mark rummaging through the fridge. But today, silence. I walked into the kitchen expecting a fight. Instead, I found a vase of fresh lilies on the table and a warm cup of herbal tea. Sarah was standing there, wearing a soft cardigan, looking like an angel. "Good morning, Lisa," she said, her voice dripping with artificial honey. "How are you feeling today? You gave us such a scare last night talking about landlords and rent. We were so worried you'd had a little episode." I didn't touch the tea. "I didn't have an episode, Sarah. I told you the truth. This is my house." Sarah sighed, looking at Mark, who had just walked in. Mark wouldn't look at me. He looked at the floor, then at his wife. "Mom," he said, his voice shaking, "we looked at the papers. You know Dad left the house to me. Maybe you're just confused. The stress of the anniversary of his passing, maybe?" That was their play. They weren't going to fight me with logic, they were going to fight me with concern. For the next 3 days, the traps were set. I'd leave my glasses on the nightstand, and 5 minutes later, they'd be in the microwave. I'd go to boil water for pasta, and Sarah would rush in screaming that I'd left the stove on for hours when I knew I'd just turned it on. "Lisa, honey, you almost burned the house down," Sarah would wail, loud enough for the neighbors to hear through the open windows. She was building a case. She wanted the neighbors, and more importantly, the doctors, to think I was a danger to myself. But here's the thing Sarah forgot. I was a school administrator for 40 years. I've dealt with bullies, liars, and silver-tongued teenagers my entire life. I knew exactly what she was doing. So while she was busy moving my keys to the trash can to make me look forgetful, I was busy at the electronics store. I bought 3 nanny cams disguised as USB chargers. I placed one in the kitchen, one in the living room, and one in the hallway near my bedroom. That night, I pretended to go to bed early. I sat in the dark of my cramped guest room watching the live feed on my phone. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted my son to be the good man I raised. Around 11 p.m., they came into the kitchen. Sarah was laughing, a sharp, jagged sound. "Did you see her face when she couldn't find her medication?" Sarah hissed. "She actually started crying. Another week of this, Mark, and the social worker will have no choice but to sign the emergency conservatorship. We'll have the deed, the bank accounts, and she'll be in Gray Oaks by Friday." Mark groaned. "Is it really necessary, Sarah? She's my mother." "Do you want that Tesla or not, Mark?" Sarah snapped. "Do you want to live in this old lady house forever, or do you want to flip it and move to the coast? She's lived her life, it's our turn now." Mark didn't argue, he just nodded. "Okay, hide her car keys tomorrow. We'll tell her she forgot where she parked and had to walk home." I had seen enough. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the hours downloading the footage to a secure cloud drive and emailing it to Bill, my lawyer. The next morning, the Concerned Family Act continued. Sarah tried to guide me to the sofa, telling me I looked tired and should rest my poor brain. "I'm not tired, Sarah. In fact, I've never been more awake. Why don't we have a seat? I have a video I'd like to show you. It's a day-in-the-life video, just like the ones you make." I pulled out my tablet and hit play. The color drained from Sarah's face so fast I thought she might faint. She watched herself laughing about hiding my meds. She watched Mark agreeing to steal my car keys. The silence in the room was so heavy you couldn't have cut it with a chainsaw. Mark started to stammer. "Mom, that's out of context. We were just frustrated." "Out of context?" I whispered. "You were talking about my life like it was a piece of trash to be thrown away for a car." Just then, there was a heavy knock at the door. Not a neighborly knock, a firm, legal knock. I opened the door to find Bill Henderson and 2 men in dark suits. "Sarah, Mark, I'd like you to meet my legal team. And by the way, Sarah, the stove is on. But don't worry, I'm not the one who's going to get burned today." Sarah tried to lunge for the tablet, but Bill stepped in the way. "I wouldn't do that, Mrs. Miller," he said calmly. "We're here to discuss the illegal attempt at conservatorship, and more importantly, we're here to discuss your immediate eviction." They say a cornered animal is the most dangerous, and Sarah was no exception. When my lawyer walked through that door with the eviction notices, she didn't just give up. She faked a medical emergency, called 911, and tried to claim I was attacking her. But as the police arrived, a strange noise coming from my own attic changed everything. Stick around, because what the sheriff found hidden above our heads made even the toughest cops gasp. Sarah wasn't just trying to take my house. She was hiding a criminal secret right under my nose. As Bill, my lawyer, handed the papers to Mark, Sarah did exactly what I expected a drama queen to do. She clutched her chest, let out a piercing wail, and collapsed onto my Persian rug. "Mark, I can't breathe. She's poisoned the tea," she gasped, pointing a trembling finger at me. Mark panicked. "Mom, what did you do?" he yelled, reaching for his phone to dial 911. I stood there, arms crossed, watching the performance. I'd seen Sarah faint before when she wanted to get out of doing the dishes, but this was her best work yet. Within 10 minutes, sirens were wailing down our quiet suburban street. The neighbors were peeking through their blinds. 2 paramedics and a sheriff's deputy, Deputy Miller, came rushing in. "She's unstable," Sarah screamed the moment the deputy walked in. "She's been hiding my medication and trying to force us out of our home. Look at her, she's cold-blooded." Deputy Miller looked at Sarah, then at me. He had been for my house once before, years ago, when my husband was still alive. He knew I was a respected school administrator. He also saw that I was the only one in the room who wasn't sweating or screaming. "Ma'am," the deputy said to me, "can you explain what's going on?" "Certainly, deputy," I replied, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "I've served Sarah and Mark with a legal eviction notice. They've been attempting to gaslight me into a conservatorship, and I have the video evidence to prove it. As for the poisoning, the tea is Earl Grey, bought from the local market. Feel free to test it." Just as Sarah started her next round of fake sobbing, a loud, heavy thud echoed from the ceiling. Everyone froze. It sounded like a heavy box being dropped, right in the attic above the living room. "Is there someone else in the house, Lisa?" the deputy asked, his hand moving instinctively toward his holster. "No," I said, frowning. "I haven't been in the attic in months. Sarah said the stairs were too rickety for me." I looked at Sarah. Her face, which had been flushed with pain moments ago, turned a sickly shade of gray. She wasn't faking anymore. She was terrified. It's just squirrels, officer," she stammered, scrambling to her feet. "Huge squirrels. We've been meaning to call an exterminator. You don't need to go up there." The deputy looked at the ceiling, then back at Sarah. "That's a big squirrel to make the floorboards groan like that. Mark, where's the pull-down ladder?" Mark looked confused. It's in the hallway, but Sarah has the key to the latch. She said she wanted to keep the insulation safe." "A key for an attic?" Deputy Miller's eyebrows shot up. "Mrs. Miller, open the attic, now." Sarah tried to refuse, claiming she'd lost the key, but the deputy wasn't playing games. He used a crowbar from his cruiser. As the ladder descended, a smell hit us. Chemical, sharp, and unmistakably wrong. The deputy went up first, flashlight cutting through the dust. A moment later, we heard him swear under his breath. "Dispatch, I need backup at this address. We've got a major recovery operation." When I climbed up behind him, despite Sarah's protests, my jaw dropped. My beautiful, clean attic was filled with high-end designer bags, stacks of luxury electronics, and hundreds of unopened shipping boxes. "What is this?" I whispered. "It's a retail theft ring, Lisa," Bill, my lawyer, said, looking over my shoulder. "These are all stolen goods, thousands of dollars worth. Look at the labels. These are from the high-end mall across town where Sarah works as a personal shopper." Sarah had been using my home, the home she called too old and too small, as a warehouse for a massive shoplifting operation. She wasn't just trying to get my house for the space. She needed a place where the police wouldn't look. She thought a quiet elderly woman's attic was the perfect cover. Sarah tried to run for the back door, but the second deputy was already there. As the handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists, she turned to Mark, screaming for him to help her. But Mark was staring at the pile of stolen goods, then at me. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear, I thought she was just successful at her job." "You didn't know because you didn't want to know, Mark," I said, my heart breaking for the last time. "You were too busy dreaming about that Tesla to see that your wife was turning my home into a hideout for criminals." As they led Sarah out in tears, the neighbors finally had something real to gossip about. But I wasn't done, because as the police cleared out the attic, they found one more thing, a small fireproof safe that belonged to my late husband, a safe that Mark had told me was lost in the move. I opened the safe right there in front of the deputy and the lawyer. Inside wasn't money. It was a life insurance policy and a second will, one that Mark and Sarah had hidden from me. "Bill," I said, my hand shaking as I read the document, "does this say what I think it says?" Bill scanned the page and his eyes widened. "Lisa, if this is real, you don't just own this house. You own the company Mark works for. All of it."
Imagine working for a massive corporation for 10 years, kissing your boss's feet just to get a promotion,
only to find out your penniless mother actually owns the entire company. My son, Mark, was about to learn that the woman he tried to kick into a nursing home was the same woman who signed his paychecks. But as the truth came out, Mark didn't apologize. He did something even worse. Stay tuned, because today the tables don't just turn, they flip entirely, and Mark finds out what happens when you treat the chairman of the board like a maid. The dust in the attic was still settling as Sarah was being loaded into the back of the patrol car. Mark stood on the lawn, looking like a lost child, but I was back in the living room with my lawyer, Bill, staring at the documents from my husband's hidden safe. My late husband, Arthur, was a man of few words and many secrets. He always told me, "Lisa, keep your light under a bushel until the world gets dark." I never understood what he meant until now. "Lisa," Bill said, adjusting his glasses, "Arthur didn't just have a pension. He was a founding silent partner of Apex Logistics, the very firm where Mark works as a senior manager. These shares were held in a private trust that only unlocks upon the discovery of foul play or an attempt to move you from this home. Arthur knew. He knew Mark was weak, and he knew whoever Mark married would likely be a shark." I looked at the certificates. The valuation was in the tens of millions. For years, I had lived on a modest school teacher's pension, clipping coupons and wearing sweaters with holes in the elbows while I sat on a mountain of gold. I did it because... The next Monday, Mark went to work. He thought he could just move past the attic incident. He figured with Sarah in jail, he could play the victim and crawl back into my good graces so I'd pay for her lawyers. He didn't know I had called an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. I didn't wear my usual floral apron or my world's best grandma slippers. I put on a charcoal gray Chanel suit I'd kept in a vacuum-sealed bag for 15 years. I had a professional stylist come to my hotel room because I'd already changed the locks on the house, and I walked into the Apex headquarters with Bill by my side. Mark was standing by the coffee machine, complaining to his coworkers about his crazy mother and how his wife was wrongfully accused. He didn't even recognize me at first as I walked past him toward the executive elevator. "Hey, ma'am, you can't go up there. That's for the board of directors only," Mark shouted, running after me. I turned around, adjusted my pearls, and looked him right in the eye. "Actually, Mark, I'm the only one who can go up there. You, on the other hand, are late for your 9:15 performance review." The boardroom was filled with men in expensive suits. When I walked in, they all stood up. They knew the silent partner was finally speaking. Mark stood in the doorway, his mouth hanging open like a fish out of water. "Mom, what is this? Is this some kind of joke?" he stammered. "Sit down, Mark," I said, taking the seat at the head of the table. I looked at the CEO, a man who had been ignoring Mark's department's complaints for months. "Gentlemen, I am Lisa Miller. I hold 51% of the voting shares of this company, and my first order of business is a full audit of the logistics department, specifically the disappearance of high-end electronics from our shipping containers over the last year." Mark's face went from pale to ghostly white. He realized it then. The stolen goods in my attic didn't just come from malls. They were being diverted from his own company. Sarah wasn't just a shoplifter. She was using Mark's login credentials to steal from the very company I owned. After the meeting, Mark cornered me in the hallway. He wasn't arrogant anymore. He was shaking. "Mom, please, if the board finds out I gave Sarah my password, I'll go to prison too. You have to stop the audit. We're family." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the boy I used to read bedtime stories to, but I also saw the man who watched his wife treat me like a servant. "Family?" I whispered. "Was I family when you signed the papers for Gray Oaks? Was I family when you told Sarah it was time I moved on so you could have a home gym? You didn't care about family when you thought I was a burden. Now that I'm the boss, suddenly blood is thicker than water? I'll change, Mom. I'll fire the lawyers for Sarah. I'll take care of you forever." "No, Mark," I said, signaling for security. "You won't, because as of this moment, you are terminated for cause, and I suggest you find a very good lawyer of your own, because the board isn't just firing you. They're filing charges for embezzlement." As security escorted my own son out of the building he thought he would one day run, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But the drama wasn't over. I went back to my house, and found a private investigator waiting for me. He had been looking into Sarah's background since the arrest. "Mrs. Miller," the investigator said, handing me a file, "you might want to see this. Sarah isn't who she says she is, and Mark isn't the first husband she's tried to do this to. There are 2 other grandmothers in 2 different states who ended up in nursing homes because of her, and one of them, she's still alive and she wants to talk to you." My heart stopped.
This wasn't just a family feud anymore. It was a serial scam. I picked up the phone to call the number in the file. A shaky, elderly voice answered. "Hello?" I said. "My aunt is Lisa Miller. I think we have a common enemy." The voice on the other end gasped. "Lisa? Thank God you called. Did she tell you about the life insurance secret yet? If you don't find the second set of pills in your medicine cabinet, you won't live to see the trial." I thought the worst thing my daughter-in-law did was try to steal my house. I was wrong. After a chilling phone call from a woman I'd never met, I realized Sarah wasn't just a thief, she was a predator who had done this before. "Check your medicine cabinet," the voice had warned. What I found hidden inside my daily vitamins sent a shiver down my spine that I can still feel today. Sarah didn't want me in a nursing home. She wanted me under the ground. Stick around, because the forensic results of what was in those pills changed this from an eviction to a murder investigation. The phone call from the stranger, a woman named Martha from Ohio, had left me shaking. I walked into my bathroom, the same bathroom Sarah had remodeled for me just 2 months ago. She told me she wanted me to have a spa-like experience for my golden years. Now those marble tiles felt like a cold tomb. I opened the cabinet. There it was, my bottle of daily multivitamins. I'd been taking them every morning with the tea Sarah made for me. I poured the pills out onto the counter. At first glance, they looked normal, but as I looked closer, I noticed a tiny surgical-grade scratch on the side of the capsules. I called my lawyer, Bill, and told him to bring a private lab technician. We didn't go to the police yet. I needed to be 100% sure. 2 hours later, the technician opened one of the capsules. Inside, mixed with the vitamin powder, was a potent, tasteless blood thinner, a dose 3 times higher than what any human should take. "Lisa," the technician said, his face pale, "if you had tripped and fallen, or even cut your finger while cooking, you wouldn't have stopped bleeding. You would have slipped away in minutes. It would have looked like an accidental death of an elderly woman." I didn't cry. The time for tears had passed when I saw my son's face in that boardroom. Now I was a woman on a mission. I drove down to the county jail where Sarah was being held for the retail theft. She was sitting behind the glass, looking disheveled but still arrogant. "Come to bail me out, Lisa?" she sneered. "You better, or I'll tell Mark to never let you see your future grandkids." I leaned in close to the glass. "There are no grandkids, Sarah, because there is no future for you. I spoke to Martha today, from Ohio." The color didn't just leave Sarah's face. It was like she turned into a statue. Her eyes darted toward the guard. "I know about the vitamins, Sarah. And more importantly, the police in Ohio just reopened the case of your late first husband. It turns out he didn't die of a heart attack. He died of the exact same blood complications I was supposed to have next week." While Sarah sat in shock, I had one more person to deal with, my son. Mark was sitting on the porch of the house he was no longer allowed to enter. He looked broken. He'd lost his job, his reputation, and his wife was a criminal. He thought he'd reached rock bottom, but I was about to drop him even further. "Mark," I said, handing him the lab report. "Read this." He scanned the pages, his eyes widening. "Vitamins? Poison? Mom, what is this? Sarah said these were for your heart." "She was right," I said bitterly. "They were meant to stop my heart forever. And you, Mark, you were the one who brought me that tea every morning. You were the one who told me, 'Mom, don't forget your pills.' Tell me, did you know? Did you help her?" Mark fell to his knees, sobbing. "No, I swear. I thought she loved us. I thought we were building a life." "You weren't building a life, Mark. You were building a crime scene. And because you were so blinded by greed, you almost became your mother's executioner." Just as Mark was pleading for forgiveness, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. A man stepped out, tall, mid-40s, with a deep scar running along his jawline. He didn't look like a lawyer or a cop. He looked like trouble. Mark stood up, wiping his eyes. "Who are you? The house is closed." The man ignored Mark and walked straight up to me. "Lisa Miller? My name is David. I'm Martha's son from Ohio. My father was Sarah's first victim." He handed me a small, rusted metal box. My father hid this under the floorboards before he passed away. He knew she was coming for him. It contains the ledger of Sarah's real identity. Her name isn't Sarah, and she isn't from Ohio. I opened the box. Inside were 3 different passports with 3 different names, all with Sarah's face. But at the bottom was a marriage certificate from 20 years ago. The husband's name? It wasn't David's father. It was a name I recognized from the Apex Logistics Board of Directors. The realization hit me like a freight train. Sarah hadn't picked Mark by accident. She had targeted him because she knew who his father was. She knew about the silent partnership in Apex. This wasn't a family dispute. It was a corporate takeover orchestrated by a professional black widow who had been playing the long game for 2 decades. "She's not working alone, Lisa," David warned. "The CEO of Apex? The one you sat next to in the boardroom? He's her brother. They've been liquidating companies and disposing of owners for years. You're just the latest stop on their tour." I looked at the CEO's name on the marriage certificate. My mind raced back to the boardroom. He had been so helpful, so eager to audit the department. Now I realized why. He wasn't auditing to find the truth. He was auditing to erase the evidence before the police could find it. I looked at Mark, then at David. "We have to get back to the office," I whispered. "Now, before they delete the records." But as I turned to my car, I saw the smoke. In the distance, the top floor of the Apex headquarters, the floor where all the legal files were kept, was engulfed in flames.
They say if you can't win the game, you should burn the board. That's exactly what Sarah's brother, the CEO of Apex, tried to do when he realized I had the evidence. As I stood in my driveway, watching the corporate headquarters go up in flames, I realized 40 years of my husband's legacy was being turned to ash. But what the arsonists didn't know was that Arthur was always 3 steps ahead of them, even from the grave. Stick around, because what I found inside a hidden fireproof vault in the basement of that burning building changed everything I knew about my husband's death. The drive to the city felt like a blur. Mark was in the passenger seat, his face white as a sheet, staring at the orange glow on the horizon. For the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about himself. "Mom, the servers, all the evidence of Sarah's theft is in that building," he shouted over the wind. But I wasn't thinking about the electronics. I was thinking about the man who stood by and watched his wife try to kill me. "The evidence isn't on the servers, Mark," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "It's in the archives, and if that building falls, the truth falls with it." When we arrived, the scene was chaos. Fire trucks were everywhere, but the fire was focused solely on the top 3 floors, the executive suites. The CEO, Mr. Sterling, was standing on the sidewalk, a fake look of horror on his face. He was even holding a handkerchief to his eyes. "Lisa," he cried out as I approached, "it's a tragedy. A short circuit in the server room. Everything is lost." I walked right up to Sterling. I didn't care about the heat or the smoke. I pulled out the marriage certificate David had given me, the one showing him married to Sarah under a different name 20 years ago. "Funny thing about short circuits, James," I whispered, leaning in so the reporters couldn't hear. "They don't usually start in the middle of a fraud audit, and they certainly don't start when the chairman of the board has proof that you and your sister have been liquidating company assets into offshore accounts for a decade." Sterling stopped crying. His face went cold, his eyes turning into 2 chips of blue ice. "You're a school teacher, Lisa. You're out of your league. By morning, there won't be a single scrap of paper linking me to Sarah or this company's missing millions. Go home and be a grandma before you get hurt." I smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had spent 40 years managing unruly teenagers. "You forgot one thing, James. My husband Arthur built this building, and he didn't trust people like you. He built a failsafe, and it isn't on the top floor." While the firefighters were focused on the roof, I grabbed Mark and David. "Follow me," I commanded. We went around to the loading docks in the back. Because I was the majority shareholder, my biometric scan, which the board had tried to deactivate but failed, still worked on the service elevator. We descended. While the fire roared above, the basement was cold and damp. We reached a heavy, unmarked steel door. "What is this place?" Mark asked, coughing from the faint smell of smoke. "Your father's real office," I replied. I entered a code I had memorized 20 years ago, the date of our first anniversary. The door hissed open. Inside wasn't a corporate office. It was a high-tech monitoring station. Screens flickered to life, showing every room in the building. Arthur had wired the entire headquarters with a secondary independent security system that only he, and now I, could access. We watched the screens in silence. On the top floor, through the smoke, we saw Sterling's private security team. They weren't saving people. They were throwing files into the fire. But then David pointed to a screen in the far corner. "Lisa, look, that's the CEO's private safe." On the screen, a man in a gas mask was trying to open the safe, but it wouldn't budge. Suddenly, a voice boomed over the building's hidden intercom.
a voice that made my heart stop. It was Arthur's voice, recorded but loud and commanding. "Access denied, James. The audit has already been transmitted to the district attorney. Thank you for triggering the fire protocol. The building is now in total lockdown." "My dad?" Mark whispered, tears streaming down his face. He's talking to them?" "It's a dead man's switch, Lisa," David said in awe. "Your husband knew this day would come. He set a trap 20 years ago and waited for them to walk into it." But the biggest shock was yet to come. As the dead man switch activated, a file printed out automatically from the desk in front of us. It was a medical report from 5 years ago, the year Arthur died in that tragic car accident. I picked it up, my hands trembling. The report stated that the body found in the car wasn't Arthur Miller. The dental records didn't match. "If Arthur didn't die in that car," I whispered, "then who did? And where is my husband?" At the bottom of the page, there was a handwritten note in Arthur's messy scrawl. "Lisa, if you are reading this, they think I'm gone. I had to disappear to keep you safe from the Sterling family. Look for the man with the gold watch at the pier on Friday night. Don't tell Mark." I looked up at the security monitors. The building was being sealed by heavy steel shutters. Sterling and his men were trapped on the top floor with the very fire they had started. But I didn't care about them anymore. My husband was alive. "Mom, we have to go. The fire is spreading to the lower levels," Mark yelled. As we ran for the exit, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. "Lisa," the voice was a gravelly whisper. "Get out of the building. The CEO isn't the one you should fear. Look behind you." I turned around, just as the surface elevator doors opened. Standing there wasn't a firefighter. It was Sarah. She had escaped from custody, and she was holding a gun.
You can lock a door, but you can't lock away a demon. As the Apex headquarters burned above us, I turned around in the flickering light of the basement to see the one person who should have been behind bars, Sarah. She was covered in soot, her expensive clothes torn, and she was holding a service pistol she'd clearly stolen from a guard. But she wasn't just there for the money anymore. She was there for me. Stick around, because the secret she revealed about how she escaped jail involves a betrayal so deep, it made me question if I ever really knew my own son. The basement was filling with a thick, acrid haze. Behind Sarah, the elevator doors groaned as the power grid began to fail. Mark let out a strangled cry. "Sarah? How? The police took you! I saw the handcuffs!" Sarah laughed, but it was a hollow, manic sound. "Handcuffs are for people who don't have friends in high places, Mark. Your mother thinks she's the only one with a legal team. But while she was busy playing CEO, I was making a phone call to the one person who hates her more than I do." I stepped in front of Mark. Even now, even after everything he'd done, he was my son. "Who, Sarah? Who could possibly hate me that much?" Sarah stepped into the light, the barrel of the gun steady. "Your sister-in-law, Diane, the one you forgot to include in Arthur's will. She's the one who posted my bail and gave me the key card to this basement. We made a deal, Lisa. I get the house, she gets the company, and you get to stay down here with your husband's ghost." I felt a coldness in my chest that had nothing to do with the fire. Diane, my husband's sister. We hadn't spoken in 10 years. She had always been bitter, claiming Arthur had cheated her out of her inheritance. I never believed her, but now it all made sense. Sarah wasn't just a random scammer. She was a weapon hired by my own family to dismantle everything Arthur built. "Mom, I didn't know," Mark sobbed behind me. "I never talked to Aunt Diane, I swear." "Shut up, Mark," Sarah snapped. "You were just the pawn. You were so easy to manipulate. All I had to do was flatter you and tell you that you deserved more, and you practically handed me the keys to your mother's life." She turned back to me, her eyes glowing with a terrifying intensity. "Now, Lisa, give me the drive. I know Arthur's dead man switch just printed a master file. Give it to me, or Mark gets to watch his mother die before the smoke finishes him off." I looked at the folder in my hand, the one that suggested Arthur was still alive. If I gave it to her, the truth would be lost forever. If I didn't, she'd pull the trigger. But Sarah had made one fatal mistake. She thought I was just a retired school administrator. She forgot that I spent 3 decades breaking up fights between 200-pound high schoolers and managing the most chaotic environments imaginable. I knew how to read a person's tell, and Sarah's hand was shaking. "You won't shoot, Sarah," I said, taking a step forward. "Stay back. I mean it," she screamed. "No, you don't, because if you shoot me, the biometric lock on the exit door engages permanently. This basement becomes a vault. You'll be trapped down here with the smoke and the fire. You're too selfish to die for a house, Sarah. You're a survivor, not a martyr."
I saw her eyes flicker toward the exit. That was all the opening I needed. I didn't wait. I swung the heavy mahogany file box I was holding, the one from the safe, with every ounce of strength I had left. It caught her right in the wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Sarah shrieked and lunged for me, her nails like claws. We hit the ground, two women fighting in the dirt and ash of a dying building. She was younger, but I was fueled by 40 years of repressed anger. "You took my son," I hissed, pinning her shoulders down. Suddenly, a pair of strong hands pulled Sarah off me. It was David, Martha's son. He had circled around through the shadows. He used a zip tie to bind her hands behind her back. "That's for my father," he whispered in her ear. But we didn't have time to celebrate. The ceiling above us let out a terrifying crack. Huge chunks of concrete began to fall. The service elevator was dead. Our only way out was the emergency stairs, which were already glowing orange from the heat. "Mark, grab the folder," I yelled. We dragged Sarah toward the stairs. She was screaming, cursing us, telling us we were all going to burn. We burst through the exit door just as the basement level collapsed behind us. We tumbled out into the cool night air, coughing and covered in soot. The paramedics rushed toward us, but I pushed them aside. I looked up at the burning building. It was a skeleton now. But as the fire began to die down, I saw a figure standing across the street near the dark pier. A man in a long coat, his face obscured by a hat. He was looking straight at me. On his wrist, the moonlight caught a flash of gold, a gold watch. I took a step toward him, my heart in my throat. "Arthur?" I whispered. The man tipped his hat, turned, and disappeared into the shadows of the shipping containers. Just then, the sheriff's department swarmed us. They took Sarah back into custody, this time with federal agents waiting. But as they tried to lead Mark away for questioning, he handed me a small scrap of paper he'd found inside the folder during the escape. "Mom," Mark said, his voice trembling, "there's a map on the back of this. It leads to a cabin in the North Woods. And there's a note. It says, 'The sister isn't the final boss. Look at the board of directors again. Who didn't show up for the meeting?'"
I always thought the hardest part of my life was losing my husband, Arthur, 5 years ago. I was wrong. The hardest part was finding out he had been alive this entire time, watching me from the shadows while I struggled. Driven by a cryptic map and a note from a dead man's switch, I traveled 600 miles to a secluded cabin in the North Woods. But when I pushed that door open, I didn't find the hero I remembered. I found a man living in fear of a secret so dark it makes Sarah's crimes look like child's play. Stick around, because the reason Arthur faked his death involves a conspiracy that reaches all the way to the state capitol. Mark wanted to come with me. He was desperate to make amends, to show me he was still the son I raised. But I looked at him, still wearing the soot from the fire, and I said, "No, Mark, you need to stay here and talk to the FBI. You need to tell them everything Sarah told you. This is something I have to do alone." The drive was long. As the city skyline faded into rolling hills and then into dense, pine-choked forests, I felt like I was traveling back in time. The map led me down a gravel road that didn't appear on any GPS. My tires kicked up dust that coated the windshield, a gray veil between me and the world I knew. Finally, I saw it. A small cedar plank cabin tucked behind a wall of ancient oaks. There was no mailbox, no power lines, just a thin wisp of smoke rising from a stone chimney. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stepped out of the car. The air was cold and smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. I walked up the porch steps, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. I didn't knock. I just turned the knob and stepped inside. The cabin was dim, lit only by the embers in the fireplace. A man was sitting in a wooden chair, his back to me. He was wearing a flannel shirt, his hair much grayer than I remembered. On the table next to him sat a gold watch, the same one that had flashed at the pier. "Arthur," I whispered. The man stiffened. He didn't turn around for a long time. "I told you not to come, Lisa," he said. His voice was deeper, raspy, like it hadn't been used for years. "I told you to stay away until the Sterling family was gone." I walked around the chair and looked into his eyes. It was him, my Arthur, but the light in his eyes had been replaced by a haunted, hollow stare. I didn't slap him. I didn't hug him. I just sat down on the floor at his feet and cried. Arthur finally reached out and touched my hair. His hand was calloused and rough. "They were going to kill you, Lisa," he said. "James Sterling and his sister.
They weren't just stealing from Apex. They were using our shipping lanes to move illegal cargo across the border. When I found out they rigged my car, I survived the crash by a miracle, but I realized that if I came home, they'd just try again, and this time they'd use you as leverage. I looked up at him, wiping my eyes. So you let me bury an empty casket. You let me grieve for 5 years while you hid in the woods. I didn't hide, Arthur said, standing up and pulling back a rug to reveal a floor safe. I've been building a digital cage for them. Every penny they stole, every shipment they moved, I've been recording it from here. I was the one who sent the Grandma story prompts to your YouTube channel. I was the one who tipped off the private investigator about Sarah's past husbands. I couldn't speak to you, but I was protecting you. Arthur pulled a folder from the floor safe. But there's a reason I haven't come home yet. It's not just James and Sarah. The ghost director, the one who provided the legal protection for the whole operation, is someone we trusted even more than Diane. He handed me a photograph. It was a picture of a man at a country club, laughing with the governor. I felt the air leave my lungs. Bill, I whispered. My lawyer, Bill Henderson. Bill was the mastermind, Arthur said. He was the one who introduced Sarah to Mark. He was the one who drafted the fake will. He's been playing both sides for 20 years, making sure that if the Sterlings ever got caught, he'd be the one to save you, while secretly taking control of the company through the back door. I thought about the night of the fire. Bill was the one who told me to go to the basement. He was the one who knew the code. He hadn't been trying to help me. He had been hoping Sarah would finish me off, so he could help a grieving Mark manage the estate. He thinks you're still in the city, Lisa, Arthur said, his eyes suddenly sharp with the old fire I remembered. He thinks I'm just a ghost. But tonight, there's a gala at the Capitol. Bill is being honored for his community service. It's the perfect time to show the world his true colors. We're going back, I said, standing up. Together. Arthur shook his head. If they see me, they'll shoot on sight. I'm a dead man, remember? I looked at my husband, then at the gold watch. Then we'll just have to make sure you're the most famous ghost in history. We spent the next 6 hours preparing. Arthur handed me a small encrypted flash drive. This is the grand finale, Lisa. If you can get this into the projector at the gala, every phone in that room will receive the evidence of Bill's crimes simultaneously. As we drove back toward the city under the cover of darkness, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, the same one that had warned me in the basement. Don't go to the gala. Bill knows Arthur is alive. He's waiting for you both. I looked at Arthur. He saw the message and gripped the steering wheel. He's not waiting for us to talk, Lisa. He's waiting to finish the job.
They say the best place to hide a lie is behind a tuxedo and a $1 million smile. Tonight, my lawyer, Bill Henderson, the man I trusted with my life and my husband's legacy, was being honored as Man of the Year at the governor's gala. He thought I was hiding in the woods, grieving and broken. He didn't know I was walking into that ballroom with a ghost by my side and an encrypted drive that would turn his Man of the Year speech into a confession. Stick around, because the moment the lights went out and the screens changed, the most powerful man in the state realized he'd been outsmarted by a grandmother. We couldn't just walk through the front door. Bill had security at every entrance, and he was looking for me. Arthur and I stopped at a small motel on the edge of the city. For the second time in a week, I traded my floral apron for high-end armor, a floor-length emerald silk gown, and a veil that obscured my face. Arthur looked at me, his eyes shining with a pride I hadn't seen in years. You look like a queen, Lisa. I'm not a queen, Arthur, I said, tucked the flash drive into my evening bag. I'm an educator, and tonight Mr. Henderson is going to get a very public lesson in consequences. Arthur wouldn't be entering with me. He was the technical support. He had spent his 5 years in hiding becoming a master of digital signals. While I worked the room, he would be in a van parked in the alley, hacking into the gala's main server. The Capitol ballroom was a sea of glittering dinings and clinking champagne glasses. I moved through the crowd like a shadow. I saw Bill standing near the stage, surrounded by politicians and CEOs. He looked smug. He looked like a man who had won. I spotted Mark in a corner, looking miserable. He was there because Bill had forced him to attend to keep up the happy family image while the audit was being settled. I bypassed him.
I couldn't risk him giving me away with his shocked face. I made my way to the tech booth at the back of the hall. The young technician was distracted, texting his girlfriend. "Excuse me, dear," I said, using my best, sweet grandma voice. "The governor asked me to drop off this tribute video. He said it needs to play right before Mr. Henderson's speech. Can you load it up?" The boy didn't even look up. He took the drive, plugged it in, and nodded. "Sure thing, ma'am. It's in the queue." 10 minutes later, the lights dimmed. The governor took the stage. "Tonight we honor a man of integrity, a man who stepped up to help the Miller family in their darkest hour. Please welcome Bill Henderson." The room erupted in applause. Bill stepped up to the podium, adjusting the microphone. "Thank you," he said, his voice booming with fake humility. "When Arthur Miller passed, I made a promise to protect his widow, Lisa. It hasn't been easy. Age can do strange things to a person's mind, but I've stayed by her side." I stood in the center of the room and threw back my veil. I locked eyes with him. Bill's voice faltered. He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes went wide as he saw me there, perfectly sane, perfectly composed, and smiling. "Is everything okay, Bill?" I called out, my voice carrying through the silent hall. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Or perhaps you're just worried about what's on the screen behind you." Arthur hit the enter key from the van. The giant screen behind Bill didn't show a tribute video. It showed the ledger from Arthur's safe. Then it showed the hidden camera footage from my kitchen, the footage of Bill and Sarah discussing the Grey Oaks plan while I was supposedly sleeping. Then came the final blow, a recorded phone call from 5 minutes ago. Arthur had spoofed Bill's assistant's number to get him to admit to the arson at Apex over the phone. "The building is ash, James. Lisa is gone. The audit is dead. We win." Bill's voice echoed through the ballroom speakers. The silence was deafening. The governor stepped back, horrified. The socialites dropped their glasses. Bill turned around, staring at the screen, his face turning a deep, angry purple. "This is a fabrication," Bill screamed, pointing at me. "She's delusional. Security, remove this woman." "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Bill," a new voice said. The heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. Arthur Miller walked down the center aisle. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was wearing his old suit, his gold watch glinting under the chandeliers. The room gasped. People literally fell out of their chairs. Mark let out a cry of "Dad" and collapsed into a seat. Arthur walked right up to the stage. "Hello, Bill. I believe you owe your wife an apology, and I believe the FBI, who are currently waiting in the lobby, would like to discuss your community service in more detail." Bill realized it was over. He looked at the exits, but the doors were blocked by agents and windbreakers. In a final act of desperation, he leaned into the mic. "You think you've won, Arthur? You think it ends with me? Sarah isn't in a cell. She's at your house right now, and she has the one thing you actually care about." My heart stopped. "What is she talking about?" I yelled. Arthur's face went pale. He grabbed his phone and checked the security app for the cabin. It was dark. Then he checked the alarm for our family home. "Lisa," Arthur whispered, his hands shaking. "The safe, the one with the offshore recovery codes, it's not in the basement. I moved it to the attic, and Sarah knows."
They say home is where the heart is. But tonight, my home was a battlefield. While the world watched the man of the year get hauled away in handcuffs at the gala, the real monster had escaped to the one place she knew she could hurt me most. Sarah was back at my house, and she was holding the key to our entire future over a literal flame. Stick around for the final 5 minutes, because the way this story ends isn't just about money. It's about the moment a mother finally shows her son what it means to be a hero. This is the end of the line for Sarah. We didn't wait for the police escort. Arthur and I flew down the highway, the engine of our car screaming. Mark was in the back seat, silent and sobbing. He finally saw the wreckage his weakness had caused. When we pulled onto Willow Lane, the street was eerily dark. My house, the house Sarah had tried to steal, the house I had defended with every fiber of my being, sat at the end of the cul-de-sac like a ghost. One light was on, the attic window. "She's in the attic," Arthur whispered, his jaw set. "She's looking for the recovery codes. If she gets those, she can wipe the offshore accounts and disappear forever. We won't just be broke, we'll be erased." We burst through the front door. The house was trashed. Sarah had torn up the floorboards and smashed the china I'd spent 40 years collecting. I looked at Mark. "Mark," I said, grabbing his shoulders, "I need you to be the man your father raised, not the man Sarah shaped. Go to the back stairs, block the fire escape. Do not let her leave." For the first time in years,
Mark's eyes cleared. He nodded, grabbed a heavy flashlight, and ran. Arthur and I headed for the main attic stairs. We found her crouched in the corner, holding my husband's old fireproof safe. She had a lighter in one hand and a bottle of gasoline in the other. "Stay back," she screamed. Her hair was matted, her eyes wide with the look of a cornered animal. "I'll burn it. I'll burn everything. If I can't have this life, nobody can." I stepped forward, ignoring Arthur's hand on my arm. "Look around you, Sarah," I said. "The house is surrounded. Bill is in custody. Your brother is being treated for third-degree burns in a prison hospital. There is no escape. There is no next husband. This is the end of the script." "I loved him," she shrieked, pointing at Mark, who appeared in the doorway behind her. "I could have made him a king." "You didn't love me," Mark said, his voice steady for the first time. "You loved a target, and I was stupid enough to let you hit. But my mother, she's the one who's really strong. She's the one who owns this house, this street, and your soul right now." In a fit of rage, Sarah flicked the lighter and threw it toward the safe, which she had doused in gasoline, but she missed. The lighter hit the damp, soot-covered floorboards and flickered out. The sound of a dozen sirens filled the air. Blue and red lights danced against the attic walls. The sheriff, the same one who had discovered the stolen goods in Part 3, led the charge of the stairs. They didn't just take Sarah, they took her with enough evidence to lock her away for 3 lifetimes. Attempted murder, corporate espionage, grand larceny, and the cold case files from Ohio. As they dragged her down the stairs, she looked at me one last time. She didn't look like a predator anymore. She looked small. "I almost had it," she whispered. "No," I replied, adjusting my pearls. "You never had a chance, because you underestimated a woman who had nothing left to lose but her family." 6 months later. The house on Willow Lane was fully restored. The influencer studio was back to being my craft room. But I wasn't just knitting. I was sitting at the head of the table, looking at the quarterly reports for Apex Logistics. We had turned the company into a nonprofit foundation for elderly victims of fraud. Mark was there too. He wasn't a manager anymore. He was working in the warehouse, starting from the bottom, earning back his father's respect one day at a time. Arthur walked in from the garden, his gold watch glinting in the sunlight. He sat down next to me and took my hand. "Ready for tea, Lisa?" "In a minute, dear," I said. I looked into the camera, into your eyes. People ask me if I hate them for what they did. I tell them no, because without their greed, I never would have known my own strength. Never let anyone tell you that you're just a grandmother, because a grandmother with a plan is the most dangerous person on earth. And that's the story of how I took back my life. If you enjoyed this 10-part journey of justice, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We have more stories of karmic revenge coming your way. Remember, treat your elders with respect, because you never know who really holds the deed to the house. Thanks for watching.